Guys, how you going? Hope you're all doing very well. This evening I'm going to be doing yet another movie review, so hopefully you find this one interesting. This movie is a horror film from Australia, English language, released in the year 2019, directed by Justin Dix, and this film is called Blood Vessel. So Blood Vessel is set during the last days of World War II. You have a life raft that is floating in the middle of the ocean, and it consists of some Australian soldiers, British soldiers, American soldiers, some British medics, and a Russian soldier. So we since learned that these were part of a ship that was a hospital ship for the Allies, and it has been sunk by a German warship. Now, all of these survivors are very skeptical of the Russian survivor. They believe that he might be hiding something, so there's a little bit of animosity between the survivors, but they basically face the same dilemma of dwindling food rations and lack of water. So the situation is looking very dire, but that's until they come across another German boat. Now, they believe that surrendering to the Germans is far better than the alternative of starving to death in the middle of nowhere, so they decide reluctantly to board this ship and basically see what the future holds. But to their surprise, no one's on board, and so they don't know what's happened. But the further they investigate, they uncover some German bodies that have been mutilated beyond recognition. So they have no idea what did this, but it actually causes a bit of panic. And then when they come across some books and artifacts, they realise an ancient evil had resided within this ship, and it may or may not still be there, which ultimately is putting them in grave danger. So whether or not that is the case is something you're going to have to find out for yourself, because that's as far as I'm going with my synopsis. Now, my thoughts on Blood Vessel. This movie had a lot of really good things going for it, but ultimately the failure of this film comes from the fact that this is a film that really has no confidence in selling Australia to the rest of the world. Now, I'll go into that a little bit later, but the things I liked about the film, and the reason why this was disappointing, is because it had the base for a really good experience. Now, this is a film that was a nod to 1980s. If you are a fan of the subgenre of vampire film, you're really going to like how this movie explores the vampire lore and the vampire mythology. I thought the first half of this film did a great job at building a solid foundation. The foundation is that anticipation of what happened to these Germans on board this ship. It had very similar qualities to that of Ghost Ship, which is a film that is fairly old, but it had a lot of anticipation, a lot of atmosphere, and it used the setting of a boat very, very well. This boat was the universe. This boat was in the middle of nowhere, and I thought the authenticity of this boat in the time era, basically in the World War, was very authentic, and it actually puts you into that mood. It puts you into that situation. You're not rolling your eyes thinking that the production value doesn't match the era that it's depicting. And so as far as the production is concerned, it is high end, and it does elevate itself past the normality of Australian modern cinema in that it is not a made-for-TV film. It doesn't feel like a film that belongs in a TV series. It actually feels like a movie that could pass as a cinematic experience. And so I really have to applaud Justin Dix for creating something that does have a solid production and does have some thought and love behind it. It feels like it has passion, and it feels like it has the motivation, and giving you an insight into the world of a director who is a genuine horror fan. So Justin Dix, I'm not terribly familiar with, but he does pose enough qualities in this movie to suggest that he is actually very good at what he does. And so I thought, as I said, the mythology and the lore behind the vampirism and not knowing exactly what happened to this crew builds that solid sense of mystery. And ultimately, a mystery is what keeps you watching. And so the movie never really got boring. And that's what I liked, is the first half is the anticipation, and then the second half, that's really where it gets into the horror set pieces and the bloody sort of violence. And I thought the violence was actually pretty good. It isn't excessive, so it doesn't rely on the violence, and that's something I always appreciate in a horror film, something that really relies on atmosphere and build-up and setting a foundation, so when the bloody sort of violence happens, it has a little bit more content behind it, which has a little bit more power. So that was good, and I thought the makeup effects were actually quite decent as well. So these are qualities in a fun sort of horror film that should have made this movie succeed. But unfortunately, where this movie falls down is where a lot of Australian movies fall down, in not really having the confidence of selling Australia to a worldwide market. Now, what I mean by that is that you have some Australian actors who are playing foreigners, and that does give the movie a cheap value. It does give the movie a sense of caricature, and it's not allowing these talented actors to actually portray and give good performances. And so you've got Nathan Phillips, who plays an Australian, and he was the best role. He was the most natural role, because you have other characters, especially the Russian Russian soldier. Now, he was the stereotypical Russian. He was the guy that can't be trusted. And in this sort of film, you have stereotypical characters. It doesn't rely on solid characters, but unfortunately, the Australian putting on the Russian accent was like an Australian making a parody of a Russian. And so it just didn't feel right. And I don't know why Australian films do this all the time. If you're going to portray a foreign character, have a foreign actor. But if you don't have any foreign actors, then why can't we have Australian characters? I don't know why everyone in this life raft it couldn't be Australian. Why did it have to have a Russian? Why did it have to have other foreigners in the film? And so you do have some American actors in this movie who are portraying Americans, which is good. But unfortunately, there are other moments of the Russian playing that stereotypical sort of Russian accent. You've got a little girl who's playing a Romanian, who speak in the Romanian language but has a very solid sort of Australian twang. And so because these aren't natural accents, the performances come across as very cheap and they're actually pretty ordinary at times. And so I thought that really became a strong distraction, and unfortunately it's a distraction that is relevant in a lot of other Australian films. And so for some reason I guess Australia isn't good enough, which can come across as an insult to Australian viewers, and that becomes a little bit irritating. You've also got some dialogue that just doesn't really suit the era, in that the way they talk to each other is the way that we talk these days, and so that really was a distraction as well. And so the movie didn't have the self-awareness to actually make it a movie that felt natural in that time frame. Yes, it looked like it was during this era, but the way they talked to each other, it was really distracting once again. And you've also got some one-liners in this film that were a little bit out of place, is that the movie wants to take itself seriously in a fun sort of nature, but then it has one-liners where it's supposed to alleviate the mood a little bit, but then it goes very dark again. And so there were just patches where, okay, I don't feel as though it belonged, and it's trying to alleviate the pressure, whereas it didn't really need to alleviate the pressure because it was actually going very solidly. But then all of a sudden they do this one-liner and you think, all right, well, okay, that didn't really work. And so the movie doesn't exactly know how to make something on a very fluent and consistent level to a point where you feel as though you're watching a very solid movie. And so they were the major criticisms of this movie, is that, okay, the production was great, but unfortunately it's the lack of confidence in selling Australia to the world which once again becomes a thorn in the shoe of the film. And it's just something that you notice and you can't really shake off, and it does become a little bit of a distraction and therefore a little bit of a disappointment. So it's not as good as I really wanted it to be. If it really paid attention to the small errors that this movie had, it could have been a lot better. Yes, these errors are small, but when they combine together, it's actually quite large, and it does derail the film to some degree. So overall, for Blood Vessel, going to give this one 2 stars. It's not a disaster. Go and see it if you can come across it by chance, but don't go out of your way to try and look it up. Alright guys, that's it for my review. Hope you enjoyed it. Till next time, keep watching movies, and I'll see you later. Bye.